I'd like to talk with you today about the theme, Listen to Jesus. If you're reading through Luke's Gospel, I encourage you to read Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 56. This is a pivotal passage in the Gospel of Luke that begins with the transfiguration of Jesus and ends with him setting his face to go to Jerusalem, which is the beginning of a special section in Luke's Gospel that I'll say more about tomorrow. Today I'd like to focus on the experience of what we call the Transfiguration. You can find that in chapter 9 and verses 28 through 36. And remember, this comes right after Jesus had said, "Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God." And then what happens is, 8 days after these sayings, Jesus takes his inner core of leaders, Peter, James, and John. He goes up on the mountain to pray. And while he's praying, the appearance of his face is changed, and his clothes become dazzling white. And they see Moses, who represents the Torah, the law, and Elijah, who represents the first truly great prophet in Israel in many ways. So you have the law and the prophets represented by Moses and Elijah, and they're talking to Jesus about his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. And part of stating it that way is to make it clear that Jesus' death, it was not a random act. He was not a victim. This was part of God's redemptive plan ahead of time. And Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep. This is not the last time we're going to hear about Peter and his companions not being able to stay awake and pray, right? We're going to hear about that again in the Garden of Gethsemane on Maundy, Thursday evening. So they're weighed down with sleep because they had stayed awake. They saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. And as they were leaving, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it's good for us to be here. Let's make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." And interesting, Luke writes, not knowing what he said. Have you ever had some moments of awe in your life when words just aren't appropriate? When the only appropriate response truly is silence and awe? This was such a moment. And it's interesting because you then hear a voice. A cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. And then from the cloud, a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." And I think the lesson there is God doesn't want us to build little booths and tents and dwelling places just to remind us that God did something special once. It's important to remember the things that God did. But more importantly, at this moment, it's that the disciples learn to listen to Jesus, to truly hear and understand what he says and to do it, to practice it in their lives. The most important thing we can do is to listen to Jesus and to do what he says.